Sabaydi.
Sabaydi.
Sabaydi. We're recording this interview for both Heart of an Immigrant and
Voices from the LAOboratory Podcast.
please tell us how you're related to the immigrant experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So my family are immigrants. We're refugees from Laos. And so I was actually born in the refugee camps in Nakhon Phanom. And we got to the States when I had just turned a year old. So my whole experience growing up was very much one of displacement, trying to find belonging, knowing that I was not from this place. I grew up in upstate New York, not being from this place that I lived in, having a lot of curiosities, especially as a child, about who I was and where I came from. Eventually, I think assimilation took over, and also this just the lack of uh, texts, right, and written history that's accessible to us as diaspora out there. That lack also kind of just dimmed that curiosity that I had. But then I eventually became a teacher, and I was drawn very much to language and working with immigrants. I felt like I had something to share with them, a connection with immigrant children. And so I was very lucky to come back to New York after living in California for many years and be accepted to a teaching residency program where I did my residency in a school for immigrants at an international high school. And I loved it. I loved being around them. And it made me realize a lot about myself, that liminal space that I take up because I grew up, I guess they call it 1.5 generation, right? Where you are a little kid the time that you arrive. So a lot of your culture is the dominant culture, but at the same time, at home, it's very different. So what I realized from working with recently arrived immigrant students is that I had a very, very different trajectory, very different experience. I would even say some paternalism, like coming back to a school setting.
It is interesting because I think when we're, the messaging we get is who are your mentors, who do you look up to, who do you inspire to be like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I feel like you had a reverse transformation where you're looking at the children that you were teaching and they're inspiring you. So I love that it's not standard, what do you want to be when you grow up, but more like they brought you something that you recognize you didn't have when you were younger.
Yeah, I mean, I always get emotional talking about my past profession, right? Like I worked in the high school for 10 years and they taught me way more than I thought I knew. Like I knew a lot of facts from books and I was very literate in the traditional sense and I could spell very well and I had good grammar, but I knew nothing about who I was and where I came from. And my students were very intimately connected to their home countries, their home cultures, partially because they just got here, they haven't been here for that long, but also I think the fact that I live in New York City, which is not, people call it a melting pot and things like that. There's a lot of diversity, there's a lot of problems too, but at the same time, you just feel less pressure. I mean, you lived in New York, so you feel less.
You didn't even know
pressure
that you were that you needed what you needed until
something
hits you in the face and like, oh, I actually don't have this, and hole.
Yeah, like when the first time I walked into my school when I was interviewing to become a student teacher, I just walked in and I saw the kids and heard all the different languages and saw what they were wearing, and I just thought this is the coolest place ever, And I never wore a student outside of going to the vet until I became a teacher at that school. I felt affirmed in showing up who I was as far as identity and ethnicity. And I remember showing up with a sin, and I had
like a skirt.
It's a traditional skirt. It's made out of different fabrics, and women in Lao wear it regularly, right, for different occasions.
And men.
Well, yeah, men wear a sarong. Right.
Okay.
And I remember one of the first times I wore it to school, students would come up to me and they'd be like, "Oh, this looks like traditional Mexican print," or like, "It looks like Ghanaian print." So it was a way to just express myself, like, and wear something that I was ashamed of wearing at one point, but also something that you also revere as like a very beautiful part of your culture, and you don't always get to show it off. So to wear it in that school setting, yeah, it was like one of those few things that happened that was part of my transformation, right? Is like being able to embody your culture in different spaces, right? Especially in an institution like education, where where I went to school in upstate New York, like we didn't do that. We tried to be like everyone else, just like we were from like Express and Gap, right?
The mall clothes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It is a sense of there's color, there's art. You could tell some of the things are made with like, handmade. The silk is hand spun, you can tell. So
hand dyed,
and it lasts like forever, hand dyed.
Yeah, using like flowers to dye the thread.
Yeah, and it affirms us. It affirms our lineage. It's so it's we don't do it enough, but I'm glad that little bit of inspiration for your kids took you to a whole new.
Yeah, even in terms of language, like I thought that I was coming in as this immigrant who mastered English and now is going to go and show these immigrant children, how to be American and how to uphold these, standard language practices, which are just a myth. But they showed me that I actually didn't. I wasn't as fluid with language as they could be because I didn't have that connection.
Let's talk about that myth for a second. Something you have been teaching me is language is fluid. So what is that? What does fluid language look like?
Yeah.
What we're taught is there's one way, there's a right way, there's a better way, academia.
Yeah.
And this is what we are processing daily in school, and the constant never good enough, never smart enough because of this academia standards.
Yeah, I mean, it's rooted in deficit thinking, right? The myth is the idea of standard language, like that there is a correct and proper language that even exists, right? I think if you were to even ask somebody, like, where do you find standard language? Like, what does that look like? It's hard to pinpoint because language is just there's such a variety of language because we are sophisticated people, right? Like we change our language depending on who we're talking to, what the purpose is, what the context is. Sometimes we get more formal, sometimes we get more informal. Sometimes we will reach for, maybe if I know that you like to sew and I'm trying to explain something to you, I might reach for sewing metaphors because I think that you'll understand that more. It's really, it's breaking the boundaries, right? The boxes of what is language. Like, oh, you don't speak Lao, you're not fluent in Lao. But I just went to Lao for 2 months and I talked to so many people. And so maybe on paper, right? Like on paper, according to academia, I might not have enough of this language. I might have enough of this language. But really, if we think about how language is used in the real world, right? Like we're using pictures, we're using sounds. that's what it means to be fluid in language. Like not only for the speaker, right? Like if I'm trying to communicate with you, but also for the listener. Like if you're trying to understand me, you're also going to be flexible in your listening. And so this actually brings me to the term kauchai, right? Like I've been talking a lot about jai, what it means for Lao people, what it means in terms of the language. So jai is a concept from Lao, from the Thai culture. That is our heart, right? Most people will translate it as our heart, but I like to even like push that thinking to say that it's more than just the heart, right? Because that's a very colonial way of thinking too, to say that your heart and your mind are not connected, right? But it's like that essence of yourself. And for Lao people, we use this word a lot, right? Like even when we say kopjai, right? Thank you. We're invoking our jai. Or when we say kao jai, which is a term that I use a lot in my writing when I talk about language, like
we know it as understand.
It means to understand, but if you take the words apart semantically, kao means food, but also to go into. So if you think about what that means, like if I'm asking you if you understand, but I'm really asking if it goes into your heart, like that's way deeper than like this cognitive knowing, right? Like what does it mean for something to go into your heart? Like your heart's open, right? Your heart
you understand it to the point of empathy or compassion.
Yeah, it maybe it takes you some movement, maybe some action, right? Because you're not going to let everything into your heart. Not everything's going to penetrate your heart. So I actually use that symbol, like this idea of kauchai, a lot when I talk to people about language, right? Because like people, I know people have used other metaphors like a band, right? Like a jazz band, like how if we're having a conversation, like this person's got this role, this person does this. I'm listening to what you're doing. I'm going to try to complement that. So it's really looking at language and communication from a relational way. Like I don't just talk to put words in the air. Like somebody's going to receive that. Somebody's going to interpret it some way. They might reflect it back to me. They might question me. So it's really just putting language into that. Like queer studies will say like desire, right? Based in desire. Like if you want to understand me, you're going to do something, right? If I want to understand you, like I'm going to make a move to understand you. So that's kind of what I mean when I say the fluidity of language, right? That it's not just like one way. Some people think you can just translate a word. It's just going to go one way. That's why like sometimes I send you videos like how I translate and you could see it's like, I'm taking part this word, I'm taking part this word, I'm going back from this language to this language to pictures to whatever.
Yeah, it's so deep. It's deep and it's also it's a vibe, it's a concept, it's like energy.
Yeah, that's why I like to focus on the jai because I feel like Lao people,
so much
right? Like you know, a lot of people of our diaspora, they have different relationships with language and fluency and their comforts with using it. But I think jai is something that like everybody's familiar with and they've heard it and they've said it, you know. So that's I think it's like an entry point for me to talk about language, whether it's with Lao diaspora or just other people that I meet who are interested in talking about language.
Yeah. Let's talk about your trip.
Yeah.
What were your initial intentions? I know those things can change. So tell me why you wanted to go to Laos this time around for as long as.
Initially, I wanted to have a retreat in Laos. And I was doing all the planning myself for a while. And, you know, working in a silo sometimes it can go any direction, right? And so what happened with me regarding that is I dropped the ball. Like it was one of the balls that I had to drop. So the retreat didn't happen, but I was still planning on going for 7 weeks with my mom. And my mom, it was her first time going back for an extended period of time. Like she's still there. She's there for another month and she's already been there for 2 months. And my mom's intention was she wanted to go and pakpon, right? Rest and heal. She has rheumatoid arthritis. And so we've been talking a lot about just the healing practices and how Western medicine is, reactive and doesn't, doesn't really seek to address the root cause of ailments. And so we've been talking a lot about how, especially diaspora just need to be back in the homeland and be where their air, the dirt, the plants, the medicines are indigenous to that area, like things that people have been using for millennia. And so I planned it around her. I said I was going to go for 7 weeks and stay for a while, and we would do some things together, explore. I also wanted to turn it into a research trip for myself. So I'm working on my PhD in education. A lot of my research is connected to what I was just sharing with you around language. Translanguaging is what it's called theoretically, the looking at the authentic language practices and fluid language use. And so I really have been thinking more about what that means for us as diaspora and what it means to even go back to the motherland and what kind of language am I going to use there? Like I can have certain kinds of conversations, my vocabulary is not, I didn't go to school studying Lao. So just thinking about how to be with my mom, explore places. I wanted to explore a lot of art and crafts, so weaving, music, traditional dance styles, foods. I think what else we did. Meeting the elephants, just exploring the countryside, and eat fruits. Fruits is like a big part of it. I don't know if your mom got, I think from what I know about your mom and her garden is that she also got excited in seeing fruits, especially ones that don't grow here in the US, and maybe fruits that they haven't had in 30, 40 years. Seeing my mom get excited about those fruits and just picking fruits off trees and dusting it with some salt and some mukpit. That was another part of the intention was, to go enjoy the food. One of the biggest things I took away was how much I enjoyed being there. I I was there for 7 weeks. That's a pretty long time to be outside of your home, right? And I do consider my home to be in New York. But I just loved hearing Lao being spoken, especially like the little kids going down south, especially to like Pakse and Sipandan. I love the southern accents and like hearing little kids speak Lao, just like their sweet little voices. It just made me think about how as a kid, like I wasn't out in the streets speaking Lao like that, so it made me wonder a little bit like what I would have sounded like as a little Lao speaking kid. And every kid that rode by or like rode their boat by, I would just start talking to them because I wanted to be that like adult that was like, oh, really curious about the kids.
It's interesting because these children don't have another cultural standard to meet. Like they really do get to just be, and there's no like language deficit that they feel when they speak.
Yeah, the white gaze, right, is not present. They're
not trying to appease anyone else or any other systems. It's just like being, and it's something about being where you don't have any kind of like comparison behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really pop up, and I know of this because when I'm speaking to my aunties, like in Laos, if I ask for their opinion, they most likely don't have any. Not because they lack the intelligence to give me, but they really don't care what I choose, what I want, and they don't have an opinion. Like that's yours. Mm-hmm. It's almost like they don't want what I have.
Mm-hmm.
They don't admire it in a way where they're trying to change themselves or in a comparison mode or competitive mode. And when the more I engage with my aunties, the more I realize like they really are just being. And we're, here, where we are, we're in a constant next holiday, next big thing, next big car, things are expiring, leveling up.
How do I look? How do I appear?
Yeah, and they don't even watch TV.
I didn't watch TV. Not one time I was there.
I mean, not that they can't, but they don't. That's not how they spend their lifestyle. Is like consumption, right? We were in a system of consumption, therefore we're constantly comparing what we think things should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a freedom. That's freedom.
It is, and it just, like I was telling you about, just how, at least for me, in being there, I am still not able to be, because I feel like I don't want to be too American to the Lao people, right? But also they can just look at me, the clothes that I'm wearing look Western, right? Or my hairstyle, my melanated skin, right? Just even my demeanor, how I might be just more assertive, less demure. They know that I'm American, or they know that I'm not from there. And even not until I speak, really, a lot of people will not know that I'm Lao. So I'm just going to keep going back to this liminal space, right? Because it's like, yeah, I'm going to the motherland, I'm going to my home country, I'm going to where my family's from. But even the fact that I can go shows I have a lot of privilege. I have money, I have a passport, I have time to take off of work, I have time to just be there and explore, right? Like your family is going to work every day. That even if you're staying with them and you're like, I'm going to go on this trek or this mountain bike ride, and I'm going to spend this money that is maybe what you make in a month, I'm going to spend it in an hour. So that's something I'm very conscious of. Like it's always in my mind that I'm here and my family is going to treat me like extra gentle and right, because they don't want, they are afraid that some things are maybe too loud for me,
Like, you brought the white gaze.
Right, exactly. And I try not to, but at the same time, like it preceded me. Like my dad, before the first time I went to Laos, he told my family that I was this American princess, that I wasn't gonna speak Lao, I wasn't gonna eat Lao food. So I, even without me knowing that, I had a chip on my shoulder. So I was like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna make sure I'm like very like open-minded and very like not sensitive, but just like open to things, right? So there's the privilege aspect, but also there's the like, because I'm in that in between space, I think a lot of people will, they'll look to us as a voice of authority and like the voice of like what is America like. So I'm always very careful to not glorify life here in the US, right? Like, yes, privilege, but at the same time, like affirm what they have in Lao that we don't have, right? Community and culture that's generations deep, knowing your roots, where you come from, being able to eat the foods and use the medicines and plants that are indigenous to where you come from. Even having time, I always like reiterate to people like, you can go and have a beer with your friend down to the river, like anytime and watch the sunset, because people just at some point, like they just stop working because you can't work in the dark or whatever, or any other reason. So I always, with my nephew or like with my cousins, like I always try to affirm to them, like, you have a lot, right? And it's those things that you were saying earlier about how, they're not consumers like we are, but at the same time, like they can consume on TikTok, and you know, a lot of goods come through from China and from Vietnam and Thailand, and so they're, you know, they might be heading towards that direction. So I think it's important for them to know, you know, the things that we even see about Lao people, because
the city will consume before my
yes,
town
right. The city will definitely consume. Like in the cities, there's, you know, Uber type apps and food delivery apps. So you know, it is tansamay. That's what they would say, right? Modern.
Yeah.
With the times.
Yeah. Tansamay.
Tansamay. Maybe I didn't say earlier, but my intention of being with my mom specifically is that I am just more curious about the women in my family, because, you know, I think we always hear men's stories, you know, the things that men did, and I just don't know enough about the women in my family. So I wanted to know more about my mom. I, you know, have been wanting to know more about my grandmas and great grandmothers. And, you know, you can ask your family and be like, oh, tell me about this person. But there's also just so much value in being able to see, and especially and like here, right? So one of the things that I've been sharing about is just what I learned about my mom from other people, because your mom is going to say some things about her life growing up, but then her friends and her siblings are going to tell you other parts of her story. And so just being able to get a fuller picture of my mom was really important, is really important, right? And then in terms of my research, you know, my research has really, I've been doing it with my mom, because I just feel like my mom has a lot to share. She has a lot of knowledge. I don't think we always tap into it and affirm mom's intellect and mom's strength and mom's skill. And so as I really dove into my research and thinking about my education and language and bilingual education specifically, my mom was there to do a lot of that wondering with me. And I was actually really surprised when she would share her experiences with language and how people made her feel deficit, right? Or made her feel like she lacked things because of her accent, or, you know, all those things. But then to just like really come at it from a expansive way, to look at her and her language and her knowledge. So, you know, as I've been learning Lao, becoming literate in it, my mom has been the one to like do it with me, you know, like she'll send me little sentences here and there and be like, read it, you know. So it's been fun to have my mom teach me how to read and write in Lao. And so just looking at my mom and I at a microcosm, just been thinking more about other Lao women like you and the other women that we are in community with through LAOboratory, and our mother swans, and the things that we've just been intentional about. And so I, you know, I just kind of expanding the way that I'm the relationship with my mom and I, and research and language and reconnection, and just sharing it, right, has been important. And just like hearing other people as they engage with what I've been sharing is just illuminating a lot of things for me. I think, you know, as refugees, as Lao diaspora, you and I, we're 1.5 generation. We're now like middle aged. Silly to say. We're middle aged, right? And I think, you know, through different experiences, through having kids or through our careers, or just through events that have been happening in our lifetimes, we have our own curiosities, and we're coming back to culture and language and to diaspora in our own ways, right? Like I think a lot of my connection or disconnection with diaspora has been, because of just some of the things that my family has thought about other Lao people, or just their desire to assimilate, and they just didn't know how important it would be, right? Like once you get out of survival mode, like what is it that you are really yearning for? So just to look at our experiences from using a method, right? Using a system to look at our experiences and see the research, the data that's in that, and how it can inform bilingual education policy, how it can inform ethnic studies, DEI, how it informs teacher education, because we are part of the largest refugee resettlement in the history of the country, right? And as we see the way that things are going in the world, like migration is not stopping, right? Refugee crises are not stopping anytime soon. So just to take a closer look at our diaspora, our experiences, and what that means.
Yeah, there's a bigger picture, and there's like these
right. It's exactly, and which is, I think that's
as much as it's loud.
It's beautiful when you can see the world in just like a relationship between two people, right? That you could see all of society between what's happening between just you and I, or like you and your mom, or me and my mom. So I think to be able to see that, like that, it's taken me a long time to see the value in my own experience, because a lot of my research up until now, a lot of my focus has been on my students and being in the classroom, but I'm discounting the fact that all of that really goes back to me, and my experiences with language and with education.
What are some advice that you have for people connecting with their roots?
Try to take off that white gaze. That's
hard.
It is hard, because that's all that we've been fed, right? But to learn about what the white gaze is.
Okay,
right?
First of all, when we say white gaze,
yeah,
it sounds like GAYS.
Yeah, GAZE, gaze. Yeah, so Toni Morrison talks about it, right? And this is for anybody that grows up in a white supremacist society, like you are ingrained with ideas on what is supposed to be appropriate, what is superior, what is right, and oftentimes those things come from are prescribed to us by Euro-American colonial culture.
The difference between white gaze from maybe someone who's American and born and raised and generationally from America, and one that is like an immigrant or a refugee is we are things twice, like two times. One for our family to understand, and then one for society to see us as worthy enough. So it is a complicated integration, and sometimes, especially after 18 years old, we don't have the affirming aspect of our home anymore. We go out into the world and then we perform. We perform for work, we perform for pay, for academia, for whatever, to find new belonging, to find new community, to be online, to be interactive. It only functions in after you leave the home through white supremacy. So it's hard to undo that, and the fact that we're having these conversations allows us to go back into our roots and then start to really be aware of where the white gaze shows up. So it's almost like we're the project that we want to speak about, and like the work is really important. The white gaze through language, the way we look, what we eat, everything essentially. And it's a lot of pressure once you realize it's happening to you. It's a lot of pressure, because then you're realizing when you do perform for the white gaze, you are not authentic, but that's what the world wants you to be.
Yeah, and I want to use an example of padak, because padak, right, is essential to Lao cooking. It's a fermented fish sauce that is stanky, but it's like a umami bomb, right? Like you use a little spoonful for a whole dish of tamahong. And at least a lot of what I'm hearing from people's stories is that when they got to the US, they were worried that other people were going to think it's stinky, right? So they hid it under their sinks. Some people started to not eat it anymore, right? To kind of like, the shame came into the house. Like, I know my dad is always worried about what food smells like, and like, you're going to take this to work, you're going to microwave fish, you know? So that's an example of the white gaze at work, right? Like, oh, what are these other people going to think about my food? They're going to think it stinks, but like, they don't care about how bad cheese stinks, right? Or like, but that now, right? Badak is like, it's coming. It's like it's on vogue.
It's kimchi,
right? Exactly. Or in Thai, like in Thailand, they use lala, which is badak. You know, so I think that's an important point that you bring up about not being authentic, because somebody will then come and take your authenticity and capitalize on it because you've kind of thrown it away. You know, you said like, it's not important enough for me to hold on to, but like, you get that act.
Yeah, you know? And we can also be the one carrying the white gaze onto other people.
Yeah.
So it's not, it is a behavior. It is, again, I say, whatever I say, it isn't necessarily about race. It starts off that way and the system, but it always carries out to our social.
Yeah.
What we do to each other, what we did to our moms, what we did to our dads, and we do to each other. Just because somewhere down the line there was a supremacy in our thought and our food and our language, and we wanted to be, we wanted to be the best of something. So
or just one of everybody.
Yeah.
You know, like even the whole thing with me wearing or not wearing the sin. Nobody told me that I couldn't, right? Only people told me that it was beautiful. But at the same time, I was like, no, I'm the only one. I don't want to be different, even if it's positive, right?
It takes a lot of courage to stand alone, let alone something beautiful or not be beautiful. It's like, it takes a lot of courage,
especially when you grow up somewhere where people are not doing that.
Yeah, or not encouraging.
Yeah. So as far as going back, I think just learning about the white gaze and how it manifests, and trying to check that before you go back. You know, like, it is very different over there, especially if you're somebody who grew up in the States. Maybe if you haven't traveled anywhere in Asia, if you haven't traveled to the global South, like, you're gonna see a toilet and you're gonna be like, how does that work? Right? But we were saying, like, we actually love that toilet because it's very efficient and it doesn't waste a lot of water. You know, you get poops out very comfortably. But, you know, like, you might be put off by it because it's like, oh, I'm not used to this kind of toilet. Or, you know, of course, the things that people eat, especially in Laos, like, Laos is, you know, compared to other places in Southeast Asia, I think people go there because it's more authentic, right? Or traditional. So, you know, things that you saw me eating, bugs, you know, live things. I think and that'll take a while for you to really check, because it's something that, you know, people have strong reactions to, like food and smells and things like that. And it's just like, if it's not for you, I think you can just decline, right? You can maybe think about like why you don't consider it food. You know, because I think over there the diet there's a lot of variety in it, and people, you know, like, people say like they'll eat anything that moves. And I think coming from the West, you're just so used to like a steak, chicken breast. Like, these are the only meats that we eat. These are the only parts of animals that we eat. And over there, like, they're eating the stomach, right? The bile. And so
you'll just find something to appreciate about each of these.
Right, and see the beauty in that. Like, I think that's amazing to look at and say, wow, like, our people have cultivated, you know, these culinary practices and like how do they know
the flexibility in your kitchen.
And I think we always talk about like insects and how much protein that there is in it, and I think that that's really important to hold on to because we're gonna run out of manufactured meat soon. Like we can't just keep eating steak and have
for it.
And we have to pay for it. And I think it also, like for them, it kind of develops this hunger for that kind of meat too. And it's like, I don't like that influence on them because my mom will like bring meat over. She'll be like, oh, they want meat, and I'm just like, okay. So I think just checking that, right? Just doing research and trying to, maybe do research that's not from that gaze as well. Like tap into maybe Lao diaspora that have gone back, which is something that I'm trying to do more of, is connect with Lao people who have gone back recently. What was it like for them to be there? How did they navigate culture and language? So just tapping into your people who have already gone there. And
are you that leads to my next question, your relationship with your mom and also your relationship with anyone over in Laos? Because we could do, we could build relationships here in America, but what about the relationships that you are building over there? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I have a really fun time with my cousins. So I, admittedly, I am not the best at staying in touch with people when it's like out of sight, out of mind for me. But for me, just letting my family know that I want to come back more often, and like being really genuine about it. Like they're kind of expecting me to come back. My cousin Ba, he works in tourism and he works for a European-based company right now, and he's been working for them for 15 years. And he's been expressing to me that he's just ready to leave. And so I've just been talking to him and ideating with him about how he could do that, and even helping him with practical things like a website, or just, things that he could do to complement the tourism, that is more like content making and storytelling, and that he should also try to connect with Lao diaspora because that's a niche too. Like I have a lot of people who have been hitting me up and they're like, I want to go to Lao with you, or what's your itinerary? So I think that there's a lot of people who want to go, with their families. I think that's a really important experience to have, but also like to go with other people who also have curiosities. Because when you go with your family, like that's a certain kind of trip, right? Like you're being shepherded from this place to this place. But I think, like you can go back and have your own wonderings and own things that you want to explore. So, I've been trying to connect with my family that's there and just connecting with the people who want to go and trying to see what are opportunities there. Because, like it's fun for me to be there and kind of liaise. It's like it kind of satisfies that teacher in me.
I think it's also cool that, your cousin found out that he likes tourism, but also to understand that maybe it isn't ran by Europeans, that maybe he does run it from a Lao ownership, his own land, his own interpretation, his own rules. What he finds fascinating as a native would be really remarkable instead of somebody, bringing in a constant touristy lens, capitalist lens, more of like, this is what I love. This is what's real to me. And that isn't in itself is like opposite of what maybe 4 or 5 star hotel super expensive, made for also probably other Europeans and privileged people, but also someone who just wants to be down with like what regular people do, is also really unique, just to be absorbed in that culture instead of like being flowered with the bedazzled of
and
that.
have like like a curated experience,
like a grit to it, right?
Yeah,
like my auntie is still, you know, harvesting her own rice. So it's like there's a grit and there's a love in that grit.
Yeah.
And there's this, you know, there's a relationship with the nature that I think anyone outside of that would not be able to translate for other people.
Yeah, thank you for amplifying that, because that was something that I was trying to communicate to my cousin too. Like, you're Lao, you know, like people on the outside, like we see what's happening with Lao, we see it being bought up by all these other national interests. And Lao people, I think conscious Lao people who have this desire to reconnect, like they also hope that there's something that belongs to Lao people. Like we understand the importance of ownership, right? And just having a piece of the place that you come from and being able to provide, like more of a insider, insider connection to this place that you want to come to. And I told them, like, that's what we should really focus on, right? Like, that's why I was encouraging him to like go and gather stories, right? Like you could start a podcast and go and interview some of the people, you know, who have businesses or people who you think are interesting there.
I mean, you really got to help them out there, because actually that is, marketing is not there.
Right.
Like, isn't, you'd have to consume first before you even know what to do. And we're the consumer society.
That's why they're just kind of,
so they're just like
consulting him.
Society, right?
Yeah.
So how can we support you?
I'm thankful for the people who have tuned into my journey. I started an Instagram on that's called Nisa, where I've been trying to do what is essentially research on there, because like I'm kind of bored with traditional research and like taking notes and observing. And so I've really been trying to push it in terms of fluidity, right? Going back to fluidity and being flexible. So just like, where do I spend my time naturally? It's on social media. You know, I like taking videos, I like taking pictures. I even like sharing, and like the interactions become a sort of data. So just engaging with my content and my material, like, you know, sharing what resonates with you, sharing your curiosities and your wonderings. That's a way to support me, because I just, you know, when you're trying to do something that you don't know what it's going to look like, and people before you haven't done it, and sometimes you don't know if it's important to even do, like just getting those little messages are important, right? So whenever I share about Jai to other people and they get really excited, like that, you know, feeds my desire also. And as far as the retreat, like I still want to do a retreat in the motherland. I don't want to do it by myself. So the spirit, the motto that I'm taking into this year is I want to collaborate more. I don't want to work in silos. I want to be connected to other people who are interested and who are stakeholders in the things that I want to do. So, you know, even just working with you, the things that we've done together, working with some of our other sisters, those are the things that I enjoy the most. Just putting our brains and our dies together and collaborating.
I don't think that's even too far from, you know, the collaborative approach from where we are. It's do everything on your own individually is actually the opposite of where you want to go anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, if I think about the direction in which I was pushed, and where I really feel at home is always to the collective ingenuity between conversations and the immediate thought, of, oh my gosh, you just inspired me. Not necessarily the documentation part. Of course, that is how we expand in a capitalist society, but like, this is important, right? Our moms used to sit around and talk and learn from each other and pass down things to us and taste the flavor and get your idea on it. Like, that's, I know that's what you're not saying it, but I know that's what you're looking for. It's just easier to build community with multiple heads at it instead of
it is, but also
community,
right? But also in the society, like, it's more work, right? Like, I drove an hour to come here, but it was important for me to do so because I would not. It'd be a totally different vibe if I were at home, right? It'd be easier. It would have been easier for us to just set up our individual cameras, but like, we came here, we set up a whole production, and it's gonna be better, and we're also enjoying it more. So just putting in the effort to stay connected with people and to like stay with your people, right? Like, your people, like the people who want to do things and who want to converse, who want to put ideas together. Like, putting that into my schedule, like that's something I've had to adjust to this year. Not teaching high school anymore, is my schedule is now my schedule. Like, I have to put everything on there. And sometimes if I don't put things on there, like, they're not going to get done, So having accountability groups is something that I'm trying to do more. Like, hey, Friday is my writing day. I'm going to go here, and me and this person, we're just going to write, So, and it's always better after, right? Like, last Thursday, I went to the school I used to work at, and it was the first time that I had left my apartment in 2 weeks, but I just left there very invigorated. I have like ideas for some of the work that I'm doing, and I was like, oh,
hey, you gotta get out of your
I just gotta get out of my bed. And there's magic out there in these people who love and support you. So like, just to not forget that there are those people out there, and to just stay connected with them, whether it's just have food, but also to actually do projects together. Like, I love doing projects. I feel very connected to people when we can get together and be creative and like create something. Take something from our inside and like actually put it on the outside.
Currently that you're working on or projecting to work on that we could kind of look forward to? Or
well, one thing that's kind of exciting is I'm giving my first lecture in next week
hey.
At Colgate University, and the lecture is called Kauchai Ba.
Oh, nice.
And I'm going to be giving a talk about contextualizing and decolonizing education for immigrants and multilingual students. So I will be sharing a lot of this and putting it into a form for an audience that will know very little about my work and about bilingual education, and probably know very little about Lao and Lao diaspora. So I'm excited to have that pressure, right? To like put something out that's forward facing. So that is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And so that'll be recorded, and it'll probably be on YouTube through Colgate University. I'm also writing a book chapter that is about Lao women and Chai. So I have been rewatching the workshop that I did with y'all for our Mother Suans, where we explored art making and Chai. And so that is going to become a book chapter in a book on Asian American teachers. What else? Oh, we're working towards doing our Mother Suans event in person in the spring. So those are, I would say, some of the things. And I mean, really, another big project for me this year is trying to figure out when and how I'm going to get back to Lao. I've been telling people that I'm going back at the end of this year. So I think I just need to give some form and shape into that.
Yeah.
And then
Still happen.
And then continue.
I already see the many ways.
Yeah, just continue having this curiosity. And it's just so important to be able to be in a place, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I especially I think because it hasn't been easy for a lot of us to go. You know, like I've been twice, you've been once. Even my parents have been back 3 or 4 times. But every time I go back, you know, the first time I went, I was there for 5 weeks. And then this second time, 7 weeks. And
it's never enough.
It's not enough. No, I leave yearning more. You know, I miss, like when I had to say goodbye to my cousins at the Talat Nut in Luang Prabang, I was like tearing up, you know, I was like, I'm gonna miss my cousins. I love my family over there so much. They're just so kind. And
well, I'll put all of your links and where to find you on the notes. And then also I want to reiterate some of the things you are looking for. You're looking for collaboration.
Yeah.
With anyone who will pay you.
So like
also with Lao women.
Right. Lao women. I would love to collaborate with more Lao women, particularly in terms of planning some kind of a retreat, whether it's stateside, but also especially in Lao. And with, you know, our Mother Swans, which has been another spin-off project that we've been doing where we've been calling it a bun, right? A festival of just celebrating.
We're just affirming ourselves.
Affirming, playing, wondering, sharing. Like we're doing a in-person event hopefully later this spring. But I would love to take that on the road. You know, like we're doing it in person here. I would love to connect with somebody in California or in Minnesota or wherever else and like do some events in person. And you know,
there goes. That's the formula.
That's like I am either going to Laos right, or I'm going on tour. So other people who are just excited about Lao women, right? I know maybe it's not something that people think about all the time, or you know, it's not important to everybody, right? But for people who find it important part of their identity and who want to just delve into it more, those are the people that I'm looking for. And I've found several, right? Through LAOboratory, through our Mother Swans, through speaking up on
so if you're
social media. Yeah.
It's really about just being visible. Like that is the conditioning, is we are not supposed to be visible. So when you become visible, you get more of what you're asking for. Or, you know, someone's looking for you and they didn't know. I mean, honestly, it's just a seed. You're just planting these little seeds for us and more of it.